Welcome to another edition of We Need to Talk About Movies, brought to you by banterflix.com. And now, here's your host, Jim McClean.
Hello. Yes, I am indeed your host, Jim McClean, Editor-in-Chief of the Banterflix Movie Review website. Welcome to the latest episode of our podcast, We Need to Talk About Movies. If this is your first time listening to the pod, then welcome to the madness, dear listener. And if you've been tuning in for a while, then thank you for continuing to check in with the show. I know our output has been a little bit sporadic over the past few months, but we are hoping to sort that and get back into the way of things. The TV show's back, which has helped. And hopefully going to get back to doing events later this year, and more importantly getting a lot more content onto the website. But that's not what you're here for. You're here for the latest episode of We Need to Talk About Movies, and this episode is another Disney special. It's part of our Disney retrospective that's been curated by the lovely Victoria Brown. On this episode, Victoria and I are joined by Banterflix's resident geek queen, Jess Blair, as we talk about The Rescuers. It's a film I absolutely love. I think that comes through in this recording. We had a lot of fun recording this. We actually recorded it back in April, and just for numerous reasons, we've only got round to releasing it now. I really enjoyed this recording, but then I always do enjoy doing the Disney pods with Victoria. So it's a lot of fun. Give it a listen. Let us know what you think. If you enjoy this episode, leave us a lovely review wherever you get your podcasting fix, because that helps attract new listeners to the pod. And of course, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already to make sure you don't miss any episodes in the future. But that's enough of me rambling on. Let's get stuck into this week's show. But before you hear Victoria, Jess and I talk about the film, let's play a clip of The Rescuers.
Who could be ringing at this time of night? Madame Medusa's pawn shop boutique? Snoops! Don't tell me, Snoops. Let me guess. You found it. You found the diamond. Give you time. You bungler. You have been down there for 3 months. Bottles. What bottles? You caught Penny sending messages in bottles? You blundering fool! Can't you control a little girl? Shut up! I am taking the next flight down to Devil's Bayou.
So that's a clip of The Rescuers, and this is, of course, another episode of We Need to Talk About Disney, part of our Disney retrospective that has been curated by the lovely Victoria Brown, who's one of my guests on this episode. And I feel a bit weird, because this is the collision of two queens at Banterflix. We've never had this happen before. We have our geek queen in one corner, the lovely Jess Blair, who we haven't had on a podcast for quite some time. I know she's been on her own pod, Geeking Out with Banterflix. So hello to you, Jess Blair.
Hey, Jim.
It's good to have you on. Good to have you on the pod again. I know you've been a busy bee, and there has been a slight issue of the COVID pandemic, in the past year. But it is good to get you back on the pod. And I feel it's great that we also have, I feel like there's going to be a queen off. I don't really know what that's going to entail. Somehow I'm envisioning RuPaul being involved. I don't quite know. Sachet, I can never say that. I don't watch RuPaul. Sachet, I don't know what they say. But but in the other corner, we have our Disney queen, the lovely Victoria Brown.
Hi.
So our queens are here. I feel like I should be queening up at this point. I don't know what I can be the queen of. I don't know. But we're going to be talking about The Rescuers. And Victoria, as you are curating this series, do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about the film?
The Rescuers is the 23rd feature film from Walt Disney Studios. It was released in 1977. I think it was about 6 months after Winnie the Pooh. It follows Bernard and Miss Bianca, two adorable little mice who are part of the Rescue Aid Society, who try to rescue little Penny, an orphan who has been coerced by the evil Medusa into finding the devil's eye.
Yeah, the lovely Penny, who I think even the hardest, the sternest of hearts would feel to not, be touched a little bit by little Penny, the little orphan that just wants to be adopted, and she ends up being kind of completely abused by Medusa. And oh god, what is it? It's Mr. Snoops, isn't that it? Mr. Snoops
yes,
is the other one. Snoops, that's the one.
Snoops.
So Victoria, you hadn't seen this before we set out the season, so it will be interesting to see what you think. I think I've kind of played my cards not very close to my chest and saying this is probably one of my favorite films we've talked about so far in the series. It is one of my favorite Disney films. It's a Disney film I have a lot of nostalgia for, a lot of love. I was hulking out frantically and went back home last week to try and I was down for doing some stuff, and I was trying to frantically find my VHS, which I know I have. I could only find my DVD of The Rescuers. I don't think it's an anniversary edition. It's just the standard one that I have. I have this. I watched it from the DVD. I went old school. I didn't even use it on Disney Plus, but it is of course available on Disney Plus. I love this film, so it's going to be interesting to see where you weigh in on this. But generally, Jess, where does The Rescuers rank for you within Disney's pretty damn impressive back catalogue?
It's exceptionally difficult to say. I have categories of favorite Disneys because it's just near impossible to put a favorite Disney up there. There has to be categories. But I must admit, The Rescuers does come quite high. For me, it is a bit of nostalgia, but it also it's a film that has that feel of some of my all-time favorite Disneys running through it. Robin Hood is my favorite Disney of all time, and it holds that little bit of magic about it within that kind of style and animation. And it's just such a charming tale. And it's a Disney of just like action from like the second it starts and the whole way through. It's exhilarating, for a kid's film. It's fantastic. So it's definitely up there in some of the top Disneys of that category.
Okay. That category, but not that category, but
Pixar.
definitely possibly that category. I would just put Pixar all on its own. I just have Disney. This is what I think of when I think of Disney. The Rescuers is pretty high up there for me. And I think a lot of that is associated with the nostalgia I have and the vivid memories I have of watching this, because we're recording this around Easter time. When I was younger, my parents, we did Easter eggs, but we mostly got VHS. There's me showing them down with the kids once again, maybe later on a DVD, but mostly a VHS for Easter. And I have, whether I'm right or wrong or I'm misremembering it, I remember getting this around Easter time and watching it with my mum, because my mum absolutely loved it as well. And then just ever since then, just taking that nostalgia with it. That's why I ended up having, as I say, sorry, listeners, you can't see him holding up. That's why I've got the DVD. I know I have the VHS somewhere for the film, but it's just charming from start to finish. We have that beautiful opening sequence, which is, it's strange. It's a bit, we talked about this with the Aristocats, Victoria Brown, where we talked about that kind of the opening sequence of the Aristocats, when it's all kind of just showing stills of Paris, that that we have in this. It's a really important part of the story, and it's not a spoiler to say from the get-go, we have Penny sending a message in a bottle that she needs help. She's been kidnapped. And rather than showing an animated sequence, it's just a series of stills. I think there's some little bits of animation. I think there's bits of lightning, I think, are in a few sequences. And we have that song that's going over. I can't remember the name of the track, but it's just a beautiful sequence. And there's a bit, I don't know why it's always etched in my head with it's passing the boat. It's one of the first or second stills that we see this tiny little bottle. We have this huge big ship, and then the camera kind of pans down and we just see the bottle near the kind of stern of the boat. And you're just like, right, okay. And the weird thing was, because we know we talked about this, Victoria, with Robin Hood, where you'd maybe misremembered stuff or not remembered stuff. See this film, was just a case of like, yeah, I remember that, I remember that, I remember this. Doesn't this happen? Yeah, that happened. This is just etched into my psyche. I love it. So, I mean, you're not going to get Jim's kind of niggles on this one. I'm going to be honest, I might disappoint you listeners. There won't be any kind of niggles. Why does a mouse have money? Why does a horse want to be a cat? There's none of that here. This is just going to be, from my side of things, just completely unabashed. It's just an unabashed loving, So that's me. I'm coming in with all that nostalgia. I'm getting the sense that Jess has that nostalgia. As someone who's only watched this in the last week or so, what's your initial thoughts on the film?
I've added it to my top 10. I did not expect to love it as much as I do. Listeners, for those who can't see it, Jim is raising his fist in the air in triumph. We had a lot of Disney films on VHS when we were kids, but this wasn't one of them. And when we were kids, we used to go to my nana's on a Saturday. It was like a thing the cousins and the aunts and all did. And it was like really exciting because they had Sky and we didn't. But we always seemed to leave at about 6 o'clock. And 6 o'clock was about the time that Disney Channel started showing the movies. And they showed The Rescuers quite a lot. So I've seen the start of it about 1 million times. But I'd never seen like past the UN sequence. I'd never seen past that. So this film was completely new to me. And I love it so much. Like, I know Jess and Jim both have the nostalgia. But it's so beautiful and so heartfelt. And it's like Jess was saying, like, there's just action after action. Like, it's not episodic in the same way the last couple of films have been. It is just a straight narrative that never lets up from start to finish. And it's so bloody good.
I would say of the films we've touched on so far, just kind of following on what you said, I think it's the most coherent in the sense that it has a start, it has a middle, it has an end, and it doesn't feel like there's certain sections or maybe through in to stretch the narrative. It's clocking in at about an hour and 18 minutes, or just under an hour and 20 minutes. I think it's not long. Maybe at a push, you could maybe say the stuff with Evinrude and the bats, that little sequence, maybe, but I think it's great in what it's trying to do. I love that sequence because I maybe love Evinrude just a little bit far too much. But it's weird because it's a film, will be open from the get-go. This is part of a retrospective. This was Disney's best performer at the box office. One of their last really great box office performers until I think, is it The Little Mermaid? I think was the next real big success.
It was about that, yeah. It sort of developed. It was like, it originally had quite a small budget for Disney of like 7.5 million, and I think it raked in something like 44 point something million in the end. They pretty much said it was like one of its largest successes since the very early day animations, and kind of brought Disney back in as a kind of family entertainment. Because I think as well, this is the first complete animation that didn't have Walt Disney involved in it as well. So it was like the first film without him, and I think there was concerns that if he wasn't involved, the company might kind of go a little bit, but it exceeded everybody's expectations, and any wonders.
I think he was involved in a capacity in the sense that, because it's based on a series of novels, and I think his problem was he didn't like, or a bit like when we talked about Winnie the Pooh on the last pod. I don't think he could find the Disney magic in that original story, so they went away and retooled it. And I think the retooling of it was done after Walt's death. Victoria, as our Disney queen, you probably are going to know this.
Yeah, like he was interested in the novels by Margaret Sharp in like the early 60s, and they started developing it. And initially it was going to be, instead of an orphan, it was going to be like a poet who had been imprisoned in like Serbia or something. And Walt was like, no, that's not Disney at all. I don't know why we're doing that. So it was shelved. And then they tried to do it so it was set in Antarctica. But then the animators were like, all that white with mice, like visually it just wouldn't work. So while the main animators were working on Robin Hood, they brought in like the B team to kind of work on this. So the likes of Don Bluth, Ron Clements, who would go on to be really big in the Renaissance era, they all kind of worked on it. And I think everyone was surprised at how well it did. Like, I couldn't believe the tiny budget they had. I know like 7 million's not tiny, but for Disney it's tiny. But for them to get that much of a take back from it was amazing.
Yeah, and I think just on that note of animators, I don't have the names off the top of my head, but I think this started as a project, I think, with the younger animators were involved with, but then they brought in the older animators, and I think there was friction there, and it's where you start to see the changing of the guard with Disney, where I think a lot of the older animators used to higher budgets. We've talked about this with the kind of changing of the kind of the artwork style and the animation style that Disney were using during this period. And I think the older animators really took issue with that in that sense of the budget. I think there's a comment, and it was something I noticed rewatching it. They talked about the eyes for the mice, and they could see kind of like they wanted to go back and fix issues with the mice, and they were like, no, it's not within the budget. And they're like, it's not going to cost that much to do it. It's like, no, just do what you're told. This is what we want. I noticed it. It didn't take me out of it in any way. And I saw, I think it was an IMDb, the trivia section, where some people consider this to be one of the cheaper looking Disney films. And I don't I don't have that issue where you see the reuse of animation from I know it does exist. I know isn't it Bambi and his mother, I think, are in one of the scenes they reuse that. It's not as noticeable as, say, in Robin Hood, where once you see where they've reused stuff, you can't unsee it. I think it's the same in the Aristocats as well, where they reused footage, they reused animation style. I don't have but again, I don't know about Jess. I don't know if that's the nostalgia creeping in, where those rose-tinted glasses, you don't see those issues. So that's why I want to come back. Before I'll ask Jess, for you having come in so fresh in this, watching it probably on Disney Plus on a lovely HD image on your TV, did you find it? And I hate that term, the kind of calling it a cheaper animation, but that's how they referred to it. They thought that it was slightly cheap looking. Did you have that issue at all?
Not at all. I think we've discussed in the previous retrospective episodes, obviously they didn't have as much money, so they weren't able to use as much technology as they would have wanted to, and they had to bring in the photocopying technology to save time and money. But like we've said, I think it adds more to the story because it gives it its own aesthetic feel, and it's like you were saying, that opening scene is just beautiful, and I don't think it would have had the same impact if it had a much bigger budget.
Yeah, I mean, I love that too. It's not an issue for me. I think I'd maybe misremembered it when I was thinking back. Of course, it's animated, of course, because I remember that ship. There's something about that ship that I just remembered so vividly. Oh, there's a sequence with the bottle going across the stern of a ship. I didn't remember that it was just pretty much just a painting. It looks beautiful. I mean, again, the rose-tinted glasses, it's a phrase I'm going to use quite a lot during this pod. For you, Jess, is it something even at a rewatch? Did you notice the kind of the quality of the animation, or did you, like me, the rose-tinted glasses got past all that?
I think it probably is an element of that rose-tinted vision. I can remember watching this when I was little, and I loved it. And to me, even now, obviously I rewatched this in anticipation of this sort of, the pod today, and I did a little bit of extra, reading around some of the facts about it, some of the information. And I kind of went into it watching again, knowing about some of those issues with the eyes, issues with the style. But to be honest, even knowing all that, I feel like that's such harsh criticism because it almost, like you say, Victoria, it has its own aesthetic. It kind of has the style of that era of Disney films. And I think it just fitted so well to that story to make it kind of stand out from all the other Disneys. Yes, there are elements that I can look at and I can go, that's reused scenes, that's reused characters, even some of them, from Robin Hood. And it doesn't take me away. If anything, I'm watching it going, oh, this feels like some of my favorite Disney films of all time. This is just, it's beautiful. And I think that's a big standout for this sort of Disney film as well. It's the first of what I sort of always felt to be the pretty Disney film. It's just beautifully well done the whole way through. So I can't ever really say I felt that it looked cheap or that it looked off or anything. It just felt like a new era, a new style. And it just is beautiful. I think definitely it was just, they hit the nail on the head with it for this particular era.
Yeah, it never bothered me in any way. I noticed the eyes I'll be honest. I mean, I noticed the eyes. I think it's maybe like you had looked at IMDb trivia, I'd looked on Wikipedia, other sources
What's
are,
the
of
eye
course,
issue?
the eye was the case of the fact that they didn't like how they looked and they could see like the whiteness, the way it was that they weren't happy. The animators weren't happy with the finished look of the eyes, that they were just black with a little bit of white. They wanted to add a little bit more character to it. I think they actually wanted, if I'm right, and this could be going back from memory, from depressingly something I read probably less than 24 hours ago, and I'm struggling to remember. I'm at that difficult age, listeners. I'm nearly 40, but I think all they wanted to do was add another little bit of black, because it was black and then white, and I think they wanted to add go in and add a little bit more white just to give a little bit more character to the eye itself. And they were told, no, it's going to be too expensive. And they went away and said, no, this is the price you're saying it's not going to cost that. It's only going to cost this. It's not going to cost a tenner. It's going to cost £5. We can do this. And they were told no. And I think, you know, there was a few of the older animators working with Disney at the time that this was kind of the beginning of the end for them. And we start to see, you've alluded to this earlier on, Victoria, when you talked about the animators that would go on to be so prominent in the Renaissance era. That I think a project like this is where you start to see that kind of the old guard moving away and the new animators within Disney. And it's strange because it's a film that was a box office success, but I think divided critical opinion. You know, some people like the fact that it was just a great adventure story. Others, I know Gene Siskel, a film critic I respect a lot, was not a fan of this because he kind of felt like if you hold this, you know, in comparison with the early Disney, there's none of the charm. It's just a very straightforward animated feature. And I would disagree with Gene Siskel on that. I think there is a charm to this. And as we said on the previous pod with the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, you see that Disney, particularly in this era, are moving away from that fairy tale aesthetic. And I think this is, well, it is, as we've already alluded to, their most successful attempt in that kind of post-fairy tale realm that Disney were in this dark era of doing so. And there's clearly an appetite for it from viewers. And let's be honest, I just love it. I just love Bernard and Miss Bianca. I think there's a wonderful relevance to it now where we don't have, I'm not saying Disney have had this. Well, I know Victoria will disagree. We've had this to an extent, I suppose, toxic masculinity in some Disney features. I know you wrote a lovely piece for us on for International Women's Day about Frozen, Victoria. We don't have that here, really. You know, it's the women are very much the domineering presences in this feature. We have Miss Bianca, we have Medusa, who's very much as much of a villain, I think, as Cruella de Vil. There's definitely elements, like when we first see her, is it New York and she's driving the car, you can go, yeah, that's just Cruella de Vil, what you're going for. And I know there was a lot of talk that this was one of Walt Disney's favorite villain. I think that has been debunked. I think in the fact that he loved that character, I think that has been definitely debunked in the years since its release. But I don't know. I mean, I'm just throwing that out. You know, I'm aware that we have two lovely ladies. That sounds like a very Father Ted kind of sentence. You know, the lovely ladies contest of Banterflix. Don't they all have lovely? But no, we're not going to go there. Not going to go there. No. But no, I just think looking at it now, I think there's a wonderful relevance about it. Now, I love Bernard in this, you know, because he's not the kind of let's go get this. He's not coward, but he's someone who's kind of like, he's not the bravest of soul. He has to be given a gentle push. And it's just lovely that it's Miss Bianca giving him that push.
I love that because she's very headstrong, she's very resilient, but she's also really kind. Like there's the bit where they're first going on the plane or the bird, I can't remember his name. But Bernard has a thing where he's very superstitious and he doesn't like the number 13. And he kind of panics at the top of the stairs. He's like, oh, there's 13 steps. What do I do? She doesn't judge him. She doesn't make fun of him. She doesn't get annoyed. She just goes, well, just jump the last one. And that's all he needs. He just needs that gentle push. And there's such a lovely give and take with their relationship. And even with Penny and Medusa, like I think the problem with Disney women, well, the earlier ones anyway, was that their femininity was seen as something submissive, something that was a weakness. But Penny isn't defined by the fact that she's a girl, and neither's Medusa. Like, they are both very comfy with who they are, if that makes sense. And Penny, like, especially for an orphan, you would think she would be a bit more, I'm trying to think of the word, not cagey, but maybe scared. And she's not. She's so, like, there's bits in the film where she's very sad and it's so hard to watch, God love her, but she's so full of hope and she's so determined. And the representation of women in this film was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, I mean, for a film that's, 45, 46 years old now, I think it stands the test of time better than some of the other Disney films, even some other Disney films that are released after this, if I'm brutally honest. And, feel free, Jess, to kind of interject with your own kind of thoughts. And that it's just something I hadn't noticed before. I don't want to kind of go and say, oh, I'm part of the woke generation. It's just not. It's just, when you listen to people and, people like Victoria, people like Dr. Juliana Monteverdi, when you talk to them about looking back at older films and kind of not kind of revisit them too much, but looking at them with a different eye, with 2021's eye, I think this film stands a test of time much better than some other Disney films in terms of its gender portrayal.
Like Victoria, Jim, you've both kind of hit it on the head. For me, watching this, like, I can remember watching this as a little kid and just sort of loving that it's, again, that kind of a girl standing up for herself. I was kind of used to, as a little kid, watching a lot of the sort of the Disney princesses. I was a very tomboyish little kid.
Same.
I cried one year for Christmas because I didn't get the right
Shock.
Matchbox.
You were tomboyish, Jess Blair. No, never.
Goodness, no, never. So, for me, watching The Rescuers as a little kid, it was nice to see a girl standing up for herself. It's why I kind of love Mulan as well. When Disney get its gender portrayals right, they get it right, which is nice. It's a shame they don't do it as often as they probably really should. But watching it definitely now, with that kind of 2021 woke vision on it, it is nice to see that it was done in a very natural progression. It wasn't like a very forced thing. It was just a very well put together story. It was very well planned out. There wasn't this kind of pushing down of Bernard, like you say, Victoria. It's just he just happened to be shy. I wouldn't even say cowardly. I think he was more very shy because he was kind of put down upon. He was a janitor. They were laughing at his clumsiness, trying to move the ladder in to get into the bottle. And they're, we don't have the time for him. Whereas, Miss Bianca came along and was like, no, I'd like him to come with me. And I think it was more for him a confidence thing. And it was nice to kind of see this nice kind of progression. It didn't feel like we're just putting women in the spotlight for the sake of it or anything like that. And just nice characters and nice progression. Mm-hmm. It's kind of hard to explain, but that's kind of the way it came across to me, is it's just building up their confidence and building up his character rather than we need to do something about our masculinity problem where every single woman needs a prince and to be rescued. Yeah. Well, no, these women can very much look after themselves. They just need a little bit of help.
Yeah.
And they can maintain their femininity as well. Like, they don't have to be, like, I say this as a former tomboy, but I think a lot of girls, especially when they're growing up, they tend to think that being feminine is a weakness. So they tend to adopt more like socially acceptable behavior. So they act like the strong female character in a lot of films is just a boy with boobs. Whereas these women don't try to do that. Like Miss Bianca, she's so girly, and I love that about her. Like, it doesn't take away, it adds to her character, I think, more than anything. And like you said, that's a good point, actually. He's not a coward, he's shy, and he's been put down like his whole life. He's probably just lacking in self-esteem, and she's helping him like see his full potential.
Yeah, and that it kind of comes across quite nicely in that way, because again, yes, it kind of does stay away like that typical Disney narrative. There's a little bit of romance going on, but they kept that to the background. They kept, like you say, Victoria, Miss Bianca, she's this beautifully glamorous woman, but she has an edgy side. Like, she takes no nonsense, and we are going to do the dangerous thing because it's the right thing to do. And it was all just so naturally put together that you sort of go like, why didn't Disney do more of this? As I say this as a Disney fan before anybody comes at me. I'm not on social media that often, so at me all you like.
Jess,
Once you've seen one Disney princess film, you've kind of seen them all.
I don't know why people get so worried that people are going to come after them, when you're on Banterflix. I don't know what that says about the Banterflix listenership. We're all lovely. We're all lovely people. I know I think...
Just making sure.
Okay, maybe when you're doing the next Geeking Out, maybe if they come after you for the Geeking Out, that's your show, that's your thing, but not in this one.
Part of the Star Wars fandom, I'm automatically on the back foot for any opinion I hold. That's not the norm. So...
That's okay. But, I know I said Carly, I was kind of struggling really for the words that, because there's no denying he is a timid male presence. He's not kind of this kind of ultra masculine, let's go do this. It's lovely that it's Miss Bianca. It's like once they get down and they discover where Penny is on the riverboat, it's like, right, boom, let's go. And Bernard is like, well, wait, we'll get a plan, we'll do this. It's like, no, let's go. And I love that. And I also love that he's someone who's inherently kind. And, he's the kindness kind of is coming out of him in almost every scene. Like even when they're on the Albatross, the boat, and then Miss Bianca, I think she's either cold or she's sleeping, and he just kind of puts his coat round her without asking. And she doesn't have to be asked. He just kind of puts the coat round her. I just love him but you've also, let's not forget, you have Bob Newhart doing the voice. And I always talk about this with Disney getting the voice casting perfect. He's just perfect for that. The way he kind of stumbles through his narrative, the way he stumbles through his words, and he's getting to his point. And then we have Eva Gabor, who's just this ultra feminine, ultra confident. And I love the kind of, like, they're very different characters, but they work together as a unit. And I'm glad. I think now I haven't watched Down Under in about a year. It was whenever Disney Plus launched about a year ago, because it was just after lockdown began. It was handy Disney did that. But I remember watching Down Under, and I think they play up much more the fact that they are a couple. I'm not sure if they're married. I can't remember, but it's much more in your face that they are a couple. There's definitely a bit of a romantic angle between the two of them, and we do see Miss Bianca kiss him at the end, but it's not a lovey-dovey, to quote the Princess Bride. It's not a kissing story. It's not that type of thing. I love their relationship. It feels organic. It feels natural. It doesn't feel forced in any way. And you add into that, you have, the characters like Medusa, who's Madame Medusa, who's just great. She's just a proper villain. I've said this before, a villain, not in Disney, but a villain that wants to take over the world doesn't scare me, right? Doesn't scare me, because when you've taken over the world, what do you do? What do you do in day 2? I don't know. But a villain that is just after, like, is it the devil's eye? I think she's after Devil's eye. That's all. She's just there for her own greed. That's all she wants, and she's prepared to put this lovely little child in as much peril as she possibly can. She doesn't care if that child's going to drown or is afraid of water, afraid of the dark. She's like, get me that devil's stone, and then you can get Teddy. Jesus, I love little Teddy. And who looks a little bit like Winnie the Pooh, but we'll not go there. Yeah. But I love the fact that she's a villain. And that's, I don't mean that in that she's one-dimensional, in the fact that I don't think she's one-dimensional. I mean, she's someone who, it's weird, I think the animators at times think she's quite beautiful and feminine, and other times she's not. Other times she reminds me a little bit of the villain in The Sword and the Stone, in that kind of way. She reminds me of Cruella. When you see her driving around in the riverboat, when we see her driving around in New York, that just brings you back to Cruella de Vil. And Cruella is, I know, feel free to interject and disagree, I think she's probably up there in Disney's best and greatest villains, because she's just a villain through and through. I know Cruella, that's coming to Disney Plus, might change that or try to retrofit that. I don't think it will. I don't know. But she's just a villain through and through. And this is what we have. I think it's Geraldine Page, I think, is voicing her. And she's great, because, I mean, I love how she tries to use her her feminine charms to get what she wants from the men and get them to do what she wants. And then she also has two lovely, I always get this wrong. It's alligators or crocodiles. I always get this wrong.
Crocodiles?
Well, we'll stick with crocodiles. You know, you said that with such conviction, Jess Blair, that we're going to say...
confidence.
It's Bruce and...
Brutus and Nero.
Brutus and Nero. I love that. And the sequence, talk about just wonderful animation. The sequence with the organ.
That was so funny.
So good.
It's just the way it's animated as well.
The sheer madness, and like they are loving every moment when they're trying to get, because if you haven't seen it for a while, Bernard and Bianca are stuck in like this massive organ, and it's one of those pipe organs, so whenever you hit the keys, all the air comes up. So one of them is madly playing the organ, trying to get the mice up, and the other is just atop trying to grab them, and it is very slapstick, which doesn't really, it's not even that it doesn't fit the tone of the rest of the movie, because there's still like consequences, because if they catch Bianca and Bernard, they're dead. Like there's actual real consequences to what they're doing, but it's so funny, and it's after such a serious kind of build up as well. It was such a nice, hilarious moment.
Bernard does get caught. You know, luckily somebody else comes in with a broom. Otherwise, I don't think Bernard would have been making the rest of the film. Definitely not making the Rescuers Down Under, let's say that. But no, I love that sequence. I love how it's drawn. I love you always get a sense, and we talked about this on The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, Victoria. You get a sense that the animators would be having a ball animating that, and it's probably not. I'm talking as a film critic here, and probably the animators would say, you know what, pardon my language, that was a bollocks to do. It was really hard to do this, that, the other. But for me, from watching it, I get a sense of animators having a ball with that, and just the kind of fun and the detail, and as you say, the sheer look of joy on those two crocodiles' faces, and also the look of pure incompetence when we have like the mouse coming up and he's like whoosh, trying to grab him and failing horribly. I love that, because I think, if I'm right, they were going to go originally for a more slapstick and comedy vibe throughout it, and then they decided that they didn't want that, so they changed a lot of the voice actors, that they wanted it to be a lot more serious actors. That's why we get Bob Newhart coming on board. We have Eva Gabor, because I think and again, I will apologize, listeners, I don't have the name, but it's the Mr. Disney, who did the voice in of Baloo in Jungle Book and loads of other kind of animated films as well. Where I think he was going to do Bernard, I could be wrong, or he was going to do a character, and they just went back and said, no, it's too slapsticky, it's too comedic. It takes away from. It's not to say that the film's dark at parts, but it is more serious than say even Robin Hood and the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. It's much more serious.
It's very melancholy. Like that's how I would describe it. It's very like it's because of the nature of the story and how lovely the characters are. There is a sense of timelessness to it, but it is also very set in the 70s. It's a film that could have only been produced from the kind of hopelessness, nihilistic, melancholy tone of that decade. Like it was a lot darker than I was expecting. There was some really, like the music, there's some really dark pieces of music that I wasn't expecting. And the way they animate the bayou, even, it's like it's something out of a horror film at times. It
feels like there's a
quite dark,
constant like undercurrent of threat.
Yeah.
It's like, it's the first kind of Disney where you kind of just feel from the very early on, you feel the tension of like, we need to go save. And then from there on, it's just kind of like that under feeling of just, things can go horribly wrong at any minute. And I think that was why it was nice, those little slapstick moments that you got, especially with the two crocodiles. I'm not gonna lie, like that was a fantastic. Like I love that. That was brilliant. I'm so glad they put that in, but it definitely just feels more sinister.
Sinister's a good word,
than most other Disneys to that point. It just sort of, it had that vibe to it. And that's probably why as a kid, like my mother hates Disney. I was not allowed to watch them because my mum said I would have ended up in therapy. I was traumatized by 90% of the Disney movies she put on for me. And this was definitely one of them too. I spent a lot of time apparently just sitting like in front of the telly.
I shouldn't laugh.
Like this, during the scenes. I shouldn't laugh because I just realized no one actually wouldn't be able to see me do that, but like literally sitting like virtually rocking, waiting for them to get through and get through the bio, like when she's hiding behind the reeds and the light goes away and then it just suddenly pops back and just not there still, and you're like, oh my god. Like, it was like one of the very first early Disneys where you are so tense, the whole way through it. It's, you get it usually in little spots throughout a Disney film. This is the first one that just cranked the dial to 10 when, here, let's mess with some kids. And it worked. And they've stuck with that recipe since.
Very quickly, just to kind of pick up, I think, Jess, your mother is the complete opposite of, we're talking about, Victoria Brown being the resident Disney queen. We know who the real Disney queen is, and that is Victoria Brown's mother, who walks around her house singing like Snow White. We haven't got it on audio recording yet, but hopefully we will get some point. But because that sequence where, again, we have on the boat when we see Penny being captured, I think they're seen in the very opening of the film, the two crocodiles, but when we see the two crocodiles and they've picked Penny up. And I love the fact that she's not worried about being brought back. She's not worried about, the fact that she might get eaten by these two crocodiles. It's a fact, like, don't you get Teddy wet? And I just love Penny in this. And I'm going to say there's a little quote that, I was talking about on the last pod about Winnie the Pooh bringing a tear to my eye. I had a little tear. There's a sequence in an orphanage with Rufus, and it's a little quote, and I'm going to save that to the very end, just when I'd kind of forgotten. I think I kind of needed that kind of statement about hope and faith. I'm going to keep that to the very end of this episode. But I just love Penny in this, and I mean, it does give me a smile. I was watching this in bed with my lovely wife last night, and spoiler listeners, at the very end, Penny gets adopted, and I literally turned to my lovely wife and was like, Jesus, there she goes. Penny, isn't that? And you're like going, yes. And then I just love the fact that she's like kind of talking to the newscaster, and it's like, Bernard and the Rescue Society, they helped me, Bernard and Miss Bianca. Hello. And the guy's face like, mice helped you. I love Penny. I think you touched on this, Victoria. She's not meek in any way. She's not, even the fact that she's in this situation, she's coping. She doesn't want to be there, but she is still very much in hope that she will be allowed to go back to the orphanage. And she's determined to go back to the orphanage. She's not kind of in this situation. She's with two, bastards, pardon my language. It's a Disney film, sorry. But she's even though she's with these two bastards, she's still determined to get back to the orphanage. And I think there's a statement, where the one point that it does come close to breaking my heart, it's when Medusa turns to her and kind of says, why would you want to go back to the orphanage? Why would nobody want to look such a plain girl like you? And it's like, if I could properly bitch slap a Disney character, it would be like, hey love, you leave my Penny alone.
My heart broke.
Yeah.
Because Penny, the voice actress they got for her is amazing, because she has that like really lovely voice, and Medusa's like in that weird sing-songy voice, why would you want to go back there? And Penny's like, if I don't, I won't get adopted. And then Medusa's like, who would want you anyway? And it's such a horrible moment, because you can see in Penny's wee face how heartbroken she is. And it was just...
It kills me.
Yeah.
Because I love
going
back to that sequence in the orphanage when we see the flashback with Penny talking with Rufus. And do you know what? Like, if I wasn't emotionally invested with this, if I didn't have such nostalgia, my Jim's niggle for this would be the fact that in this world, humans and animals can talk, no problem. Like, they're just kind of like, she's having a full-on conversation with Rufus. She's having a full-on conversation with the two mice. It's not like a case, it's like, she's like, I don't understand you. I think maybe it's just me. That would be a niggle for me if I wasn't emotionally invested with this. But I don't care. And I love that sequence where I think another child is being adopted and Rufus and her are talking, and it's like, your day will come. Your day will come. You will be adopted, and they are going to absolutely love you. And I just love it because it's filled with such heart. Yes, there's a darkness to it. There's a darker tone than in some of the other Disney films we've touched on. I think of the ones we've touched on so far, I maybe wouldn't put this in clearly from what we've heard from Jess. I've talked about this quite a lot about, you know, gateway drugs into Disney because of their tone, their lightness, most of them, and also the shortness of the runtime. They're usually about just over the hour, an hour and 20 minutes. I don't know so much if I would say this would be a gateway drug into Disney. I would definitely recommend. I think it's there, and kids do like, apart from Jess, who's clearly still traumatized. I think kids still want that little bit of edge, and I think they don't want to be mollycoddled. They don't want to be told that the world's always going to be shiny and bright and everything's going to be wonderful. But I wouldn't necessarily say sit your very young child down to watch this, because there's parts of it are scary. Like even the sequence with the two crocodiles swimming in the water, and we have Evinrude in the boat, and again, I love how that's animated. You know, the sequence, and it's all coming down in between the two of them. That's like two boats, and then we see the swishing of the tail, and there's jeopardy. There is genuine jeopardy, which you can't say in the films. Like you compare this to the Aristocats, there's no real sense of jeopardy in that. We've already said, like, we're talking about a great villain. Here we have the terrible villain in the Aristocats. You know, we've talked about this before. Listen back to that podcast, dear listener. But there's general peril. There's jeopardy in this. You know, the bats as well, with Evinrude as well. You know, the bats are horrible.
Terrifying.
My wee heart. I was like, and
I was literally
hides in the bottle.
At my screen, like screaming at my laptop screen, because I was kind of recapping this, like I said, kind of as naughty as this. Yes, I was meant to be working, but I had it on another screen, and just literally, like, I'm so glad no one could hear me. I was going, oh, come on. And the worst part is I knew what was going to happen. I've seen this before, but I was still freaking out. Like, if anything happens to that little bug, I will cry. Cry like a child. You can't be doing this at all. Disney need to stop with that, please.
Then he comes down the chimney and he's all covered in soot, and everyone's like, and then
the slightly questionable. Here, I know what ails you.
Have some poaching, son. There's a lot of that. Although I love how they animate, you know, Bernard and Evinrude whenever they've had a little touch of the old homebrew, a touch of the. I just love the eyes and the way that it goes. And like even earlier on, like when Bernard first arrives down there and he's handed the drink and he's trying to talk, and it's like rescue it. So he can't speak. As someone who's tasted poaching before, Irish poaching, I don't know about that American stuff. That'll line the chest. It's like drinking, you know, paint thinner, but say no more. That's in the bad days.
Petrol, as is proven later on in the film.
Yeah. You know,
right enough.
That is true. You know, there's nothing that homebrew won't do for you. Anything else? Kind of, do you want to broaden it out? Anything else you want to talk about? I know the one thing I really did, and I'm glad we've already addressed, is the gender portrayal, because I think there's a real nice balance to it, and it's like maybe to an extent, maybe in Robin Hood there's some degree of that, maybe in the Aristocats, but I think here it's really clear as day, and it's not done in a knowing way, it's not done in a trying way, it's just really effortless, and it just shows, you know, when you can do that, you don't need to have ultra masculine. I mean, I love Bernard, and I loved him when I was young. I didn't need everyone to be Arnold Schwarzenegger when I was young, and I think it's important, you know, on a kind of semi-serious and a typical kind of rambly way for me. I think it's important, you know, we've talked about it being positive for female. I think it's also positive for male portrayal as well, that we don't all have to be gung-ho action heroes. There's a lot of Bernard in me. I know that. I respect that. But I think it's a real positive thing for a young boy watching that. It's like, you don't have to be this ultra masculine, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger-esque character to be the hero, to save the day. And, you know, hey, he still gets Miss Bianca and her lovely perfume, you know, so be a Bernard. That's what I'm going to say. Be like Bernard. What would Bernard do? But I don't know. That's just me going off. I think it's positive in a female portrayal. I think it's also, in a really understated way, positive from male point of view, in the fact that we have a character, probably someone closer to, what's his name in Frozen?
Kristoff?
Christoph in that similar way, that he's a bit bumbling. Okay, Christoph tries to be ultra masculine at the very start when we first see him, but there's a bumblingness to him. There's a kind of fragility to him, which I like, and makes him more real than, say, someone like Prince Charming, who's, you know, he'll get the job done, but is he really a nice guy? Is he really a nice guy? But, you know, let's not go there. Let's not pull on that thread.
I think that's the main takeaway from Bernard. Like you said, you don't need to be ultra masculine to be the good guy. Like, the main message of the Rescuers is you do what's right. Like, you do that. Like Miss Bianca at the start, you do the dangerous thing because it's the right thing to do. You don't have to be like ultra gung-ho about it. You can do it with kindness and with intelligence. Like, they trap the crocodiles, whatever they are. Like, they trap them using smarts. Like, they don't beat them up, like, for sake of argument, which I think is really nice.
Yeah, because the crocodiles aren't bad, really. And sure, they turn against...
Just in it for the fun.
They turn against Madrid. They're only there for the organ. That's all they're there for.
That's the vibe I got from the whole way through it. They're just there for the chaos.
Yeah.
They've no agenda. They don't care less who they're assigned to or who they're meant to be working for. We're here for the crack, lads. That's just the vibe you get.
Are you implying then, Mrs. Blair, that the two crocodiles are Disney's version of the Joker? They're just agents of chaos?
A little bit. They have that vibe about them. They're just there, cause a bit of havoc, and then be done. We're happy with that. Because if they wanted to catch those mice, they could have.
Yeah.
Let's face it. But they didn't. Too busy messing around.
They like the chase.
Yeah, they wouldn't know what to do if they caught one. Like, actually properly caught one. They'd just be like, well...
maybe they're just incompetent. I don't know. You know,
Bit of both.
I like the thought. I really want someone who's listening right now to mock me up some images of the two crocodiles with kind of Heath Ledger style Joker makeup on, and say that, because I think there's a line in The Dark Knight where Ledger says, "I'm just a dog chasing a car." So
wouldn't know what to do if I actually caught.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So there we go. So we've nailed it. We have sorted it out that Disney's version of the Joker is two crocodiles from the Rescuers. Jess, I think just before we started to record, you have traumatic memories of the sequel to this. So it's 1990 that was out. I think so. That's what, like 13 years after this. It's a long time.
Yeah.
It is, as I think, Jess, you made the point. I think this is the first Disney film to get an animated sequel that was cinematically released.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the caveat, because there are other, sequels straight to DVD that haven't been the best of quality. We'll not name names. Aladdin 2, The Lion King 2, all that kind of stuff. Oh, yeah, Mulan 2. We'll agree on that one, Victoria Brown. We'll agree on that one. But
it didn't exist.
You haven't seen The Rescuers Down Under, Victoria Brown, yet?
Not yet. I've seen I don't know what the wee boy's name is because I haven't seen the film.
Cody.
I think it's Cody. Is it the opening of the scene where he's like flying or something?
Mm-hmm.
That's as good as that film gets for happiness. Just stop there.
Okay. Oh dear.
It's
true. I was watching, because it was one of the first films to use computer animation to do like the background, so I was watching like an analysis clip of it on YouTube because I've got nothing better to do. So that's the only bit of that film I've seen, and I know I think it's a photograph of Bernard and Miss Bianca in like a restaurant, and he's trying to propose to her, but I don't know where it goes from there. But yeah, it doesn't sound like a fun ride.
It all goes downhill.
Traumatized.
I don't think it's. I would say it's. There's definitely more of an edge to it.
Yeah,
I don't think it's like the Home Alone 2 to Home Alone. I mean, I just don't mean there's the big kind of truck that the villain has in this that he goes through the kind of the outback in. That's kind of terrifying. That reminds me a little bit of Fern Gully. It reminds me of the big kind of machine in Fern Gully. In a sense, I think maybe I was slightly older, Jess, when I saw this. I would have been 8 when this was released in the cinema, so it was maybe kind of
early.
Shh, we don't talk about that. So I don't think I got to see this in the cinema. I know that, as I said, my mum loved The Rescuers and watched it with me, and it's one of those films that we definitely bonded over. But I don't think we saw this in the cinema. I think probably we got this on DVD when it was out, or maybe the good old days of Extravision renting it. So that would have been maybe 91. I'd have been 9 then, by the time that was out. So I don't think I found it scary. But I love it. And again, there's moments in Down Under that do break my heart. Isn't it the golden eagle that we have that needs to be saved? Sorry,
I'm not going to spoil it, because I will say, Victoria, go watch it. By all means, go watch it.
Like, I'm literally going to watch it in the morning, just sit at my desk on my own and be like, right, let's go.
We can do a traumatic analysis together, like at any point after you've watched that film. I think for me, it's no secret, I cried at everything. Like, I bawl my eyes out at everything. And of course, why my mother thought, like 5 or 6 years old, The Rescuers, it's about a couple of mice. Here you go, child, half at it. Traumatic, right? I think as a small child, there's a lot of it that it is quite on edge, and I think I was very little when I seen it. And take that kind of feeling of being on edge like the first of The Rescuers, but there's like that childlike innocence to it, and that childlike hope, especially, from Penny. She always keeps that little bit of hope. Like, even that little bit where like she was praying about like, and please help me because running away is just not working for me. And I was like, that killed me. Like, it's so innocent and childish, but it's just so strong. Then you get The Rescuer Down Under. You get a kid who, right now, he has that kind of childlike hope to him as well. But he's aware of the horribles going on around him. The kind of theme of the film. Without giving it away, because you find it very, very early in, the kind of evil character's a poacher.
Okay.
So the theme of the film is looking around, essentially, a man killing animals. You learn that very early on. So straight away you're like, whoa, for a small child, this is a bit much. And take the threat from The Rescuers and double it, and add a bit more freaky to it. Rescuers Down Under.
Wow.
That is my in a nutshell review of traumatic films, and which I believe I should have my own series on. But like watching it, I watched it again. I watched the first Rescuers. I kind of had to. Disney Plus came up and said, "Do you want to watch The Rescuers too?" And I'm like,
all right then.
Need a good cry today. Might as well stick it on, and got my way through it. And even watching it as an adult, if you're like, I know I have my own personal interest. No, away from films, I love animals. I'm quite interested in the environment. I'm quite interested in sort of doing a little bit of good for the planet. And you're sort of watching it, and there's that bit of like an underage theme to it about endangered and exotic animals. And you're like, even as an adult, this is heartbreaking because it's a little close to the bone about kind of what's happening globally. Yeah. That's probably me reading really far and deep into a Disney film.
Yes, I don't want to interject you or cut across you, but I am very worried that if we carry on too much, you might cry if we talk too much more about this. And I made Therese cry on the last podcast when we talked about Disney. Cry. So I know, but I think I have. That's
my feeling on it. I'm probably going a bit overboard, but it definitely has a deeper, it's a darker edge in the first one. Maybe too much, in my opinion. And then they do bring more slapstick in to try and counteract it. But I just sort of felt it doesn't have the kind of childlike innocence of the first. It's good, but just not as good.
I would agree. I don't think it has the charm of the first. I think that the charm that The Rescuers Down Under has is all garnered for the goodwill we have for The Rescuers. And how many times have we talked about sequels that do that? I think I would agree with you. The film's message is probably ahead of its time in some regard for a film that was out in 1990. I watched it the once. I think we watched The Rescuers and The Rescuers Down Under. I'll not lie. The first thing I watched when we got Disney Plus was Blackbeard's Ghost. All right. I love that film. Right. And I think we should do a live action Disney retrospective, and I will be there with spades on to talk about Blackbeard's Ghost. I love that film. But we watched that, and then we were both furloughed, we're locked down. What else are we going to do? We're not going to talk to each other, my lovely wife and I. We may as well just stick something on. And we put on The Rescuers, because I don't think Amber had seen it, and then we watched Rescuers Down Under. Watched them close to close, back to back. I prefer the original. Again, I caveat that by saying I have all the nostalgia for the first one. I like the second one, but watching it, I think all the goodwill I have towards it is everything that's earned from the first film. But it's still worthwhile to watch. And I think, you look at the quality that was put into that as opposed to those straight to DVD sequels that we got, because this could have very easily been a straight to DVD. I think it was going to be a straight to DVD at one point, and then they changed their mind and thought there was enough there. It is surprising for something that was released 13 years prior to then be getting a sequel. Like, you look at that now, other than stuff like Tron and Tron Legacy or Blade Runner 2049, that's kind
Toy
of
Story, Monsters Inc.
No, but I mean,
Incredibles.
No.
There's such a massive gap between them. Like,
huge gaps in sequels.
yeah.
Not 13 years,
It's such a random one to pick as well.
It was it not like 14 years? There was like a fairly sizable gap between Toy Story 2 and 3, because I can remember vaguely, I think, being one of the few adults without children in the screen to see it, to be honest. There was a big enough gap with it.
Well, I would say the only thing I would say with Pixar, it seems with Pixar, it seems to be they will only do a sequel if the story is right.
Yeah.
That seems to be okay. I'm not a massive fan of Monsters University. I'm sorry, not compared to Monsters Inc. I think there was an idea of a story. I watched it again over Christmas, and it doesn't have the same charm for me as the first. I mean, the first one is just
No, there's a plot hole in it.
Go for it. Ruin it for the kids.
Plot hole. Another way, they apparently went to university together, and that's the first time they ever met.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you watch Monsters Inc., Mike turns around to Sully and says, "You've been jealous of my good looks since the second grade." They never met in the second grades. They didn't meet till they were at university. Plot hole.
Wee tiny things like that annoy me so much. Like,
Yeah, it annoyed me.
Something that's noticeable as an adult, and I can kind of let it go to a point. There's so many bits like that in Friends, and I kind of let it go because it's very rose tinted. But like, they change birthdays, they change when people meet each other, they change like certain details, and I'm just sitting there like, I know this is like my 50th time watching this, but you said you met her at so and so, but you actually met her at so and so. It's such a tiny detail, but it really annoys me.
That's what happens when you try to retcon stuff. There's always going to be a thread that you've got to look back on. But no, I think we've both sold the sequel to you. I think it's a worthy sequel. Yeah. I think it was a strange one when you think of what Disney had in their vault, that was the first film to get a sequel, a cinematic sequel in their back catalogue. It is surprising, but also the fact it's not really, because it was such a box office success for them. You can probably see why they decided to go back and decided to look at that, because it's basically looking at the box office numbers. It's all basically, mathematics. That made that amount of money. Yes, if we do a sequel for that, there will be an audience there for it.
They didn't think it through, though, unfortunately, because it probably would have been a slightly better taking in the box office for the second had they not released it the same weekend as Home Alone.
Yeah.
So, and Home Alone took the glory because it was obviously that time of year. So I think that probably didn't help them.
Do you know what was weird as well? And again, this might be on Wikipedia, and I know Wikipedia is not always 100% correct. I think, was it in France, the Rescuers outgrew Star Wars? Like, they were out around the same time, and kind of like it was a huge.
Oh my god!
It was a huge box office success for them. Yeah, in terms of
its
kind of.
You read that in Wikipedia.
Yeah, Wikipedia lies and things. We know that. I mean, I know that you don't use that as a source for any article, but it was a huge box office success for them. Now, I'll maybe caveat that by saying maybe in its first week, it was a bigger box office success. That's my kind of get out of jail card. But it was a huge box office success for Disney. So it's not surprising they picked that. And I think we mentioned this earlier, it was their biggest box. The next time they would have a big box office success was The Little Mermaid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
I think The Great Mouse Detective did okay, but nowhere near what the rescuers or the Little
Yeah.
Mermaid brought in.
See, Basil the Great Mouse Detective, and I know that's one we're going to be looking at in this series. It's the one, when I was younger, right, and I think the Rescuers played, I'm going to throw in another film. I'm going to see if I can judge the room here about reactions, right? I think when I was younger, I was obsessed with mice, animated mice in movies, because I loved the Rescuers, and a result of watching the Rescuers, I absolutely adored Fievel Goes West. Or no, An American Tale. And then we have An American Tale 2, Fievel Goes West. The look on both your faces, neither of you have heard the immortal line, Fievel! Fievel! For An American Tale.
I've heard it referenced in like other films, if that makes sense. Like I'm aware of it, but I've not seen the original content.
Fievel!
Drawing a blank.
Oh my god.
The only American film that I like animation that I can think of that I can remember like trying to tell people about this film I'd watched and people thought I was on a drug of some description was about the talking toaster with the vacuum cleaner friend that went on an adventure. Everyone thought I was mad. Turns out that is a real movie. I wasn't making that up. That's the only American animation.
Was that not John Lasseter's first
film?
And then he got fired from Disney for it, and now he owns Pixar. So
that went well.
He did well for himself.
Brave Little Toaster. Yeah,
I think so.
Brilliant.
I don't think I've seen that. In terms of weird animations, I was obsessed with weird stuff. Like there's the one, is it Sparky's Magic Piano or Sparky's Piano, where he has a piano that plays all the music for him and he becomes famous, but it's not because of his own talent. This is all the weird stuff I loved when I was younger. Stuff like Cool World as well. That's kind of like Roger Rabbit. You must have seen Cool World, that kind of Gabriel Byrne, Kim Basinger kind of pastiche of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but for adults. I'll not go down this. We're talking about Disney. But anyway, so yes, I was obsessed when I was younger by animated mice, right? So I remember like there was the Rescuers Down Under, because I probably didn't, that's that thing, like you didn't have probably 13 years between watching the Rescuers and the Rescuers Down Under when I was younger, because I was born in 82. So I'm not sure how old I would have been when I saw the Rescuers, but it definitely wasn't 13 years. There was the aforementioned An American Tale. Fievel! Trust me, watch it and your heart will break for little Fievel when he gets lost from his parents on his trip to America. And then we have, I just seen the reaction from Brian. We're going to discuss this on a separate podcast. And then we have stuff like Basil the Great Mouse Detective. And I rewatched it because I know we're going to be touching it on a future episode. And it hasn't stood the test of time for me.
That's another one I haven't seen, so I'm kind of curious.
I haven't seen that.
I find it really dull. Rewatching, it felt to me like Disney trying to do something new and different, which is probably what they should have been doing. I just didn't think this worked for me as a Disney movie, but we will be talking about that as part of this dark year, so we'll not talk about it now. I can't think anything else you both want to talk about before we wrap things up.
I think that's it. Although I do want to mention, okay, for listeners, you can't see this, but towards the end of the film, when brave little Penny gets the Devil's Eye Diamond and Medusa is like holding it like it's her precious baby, and her wee assistant's like, can I see? And she just goes, boop. And there's like a little noise, and it's like I was in tears. I rewinded it like 3 times. Oh, it was just I had to mention that because it was so funny.
I must like the comedic bits throughout it are just spectacular. Like they're just so well placed at just the right moment.
They don't feel forced at all.
Exactly, they don't detract. Like I suppose probably the big thing that kind of stood out for me, and it probably does come a little bit back to, it links to my all-time favorite Disney movie, Robin Hood. My cake topper at my wedding was Robin Hood themed from the Disney.
Oh my gosh.
I love that film so much. You're seeing the animations of like some of the characters from Robin Hood as the swamp folk, as the animals of the swamp.
Mm-hmm.
And the minute I heard the turtle speak as well, and then the uncle mouse Those were the voices
Yeah.
of like the sheriff of Nottingham, and I just was like, I love this. I love this so much. It comes back to that nostalgia feeling, doesn't it really? It just sort of flooded back my childhood and watching all the original Disneys and all the older Disneys, and it's just so nice. So I think even if you've never seen it and you're a fan of the older Disneys, you will likely fall in love with this purely on a nostalgia factor. Never mind the fact that it actually is one of the more coherent Disney films of the time, and just such a beautifully well written and designed piece. It's definitely like a under sort of appreciated gem in the Disney back catalogue. Can't really rave about it enough, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with any word you say. The only caveat I would add to that, and it'll be interesting to see where you both think. Like, I mean, where would you say? And I know this is kind of a sweeping statement and a sweeping question, because not every child's the same. But where, like, kind of what age group would you kind of say is a kind of good kind of gauge to start this? Because we've talked in the past, like the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, you could plunk, a child, as long as they have an interest for watching, movies and cartoons, you could plonk any child down in front of that. Robin Hood as well, the Aristocats as well. There's a little bit of peril in there when the cats are being catnapped, but there's not that much. There's not much scare. There's no real kind of real peril in it. There is a sense of peril in here. So I wouldn't say that this is gateway Disney, gateway drug Disney. It's not like kind of, I would say maybe kind of after they've watched a few other Disney films, a few easier to watch Disney films, maybe if they're at the level for watching something like Sleeping Beauty or anything like that, which has its little scary moments. The spinning wheel, it still sends a shudder down my spine. But where would you kind of gauge roughly? And I know it's kind of, I know it's a sweeping statement and a sweeping question. So, I mean, don't feel too pressurized, but just roughly, where would you say? I'll start with you, Miss Brown.
It is a hard question because it does depend on the child. Like I was drawn to horror from I was no age, whereas I've got a younger cousin Bailey, he's coming 10, and I wouldn't recommend The Rescuers to him. But I would say, not kind of suggesting an age, but once you've watched, like you said, a couple of the slightly more scary ones like Sleeping Beauty or even Snow White, like if you can get through them, The Rescuers is awkward because it does have that sinister undertone, and it's hard to explain to a kid why they're scared if there's nothing scary happening. But I think if they can get through like Snow White and Sleeping Beauty, I think The Rescuers, they could try it. Depends on the kid.
Yeah, I know as I say, it's one of those loaded questions. I think it's probably easier to watch something like this at home rather than in a cinema where it's dark and it's loud and the screen's big. You're not going to get that same kind of atmosphere. But and it's probably easier, if you're a mum or a dad and you've watched this before and your little child is watching it and he's kind of going, I love little Bernard. I love Miss Bianca. And then the scary stuff happens. Just be there, just be ready, just with a little hug. Just started going, I know, I lived through this. Come here, little bud, let's have a hug. That's all I'll say. Just be ready on hand with a little hug or that awkward question. It's like, why is she an orphan, Mummy? It's like, no, let's not talk about that. What does it mean to be adopted? No, let's not talk about that. But where are you going to weigh in, Jess? What kind of you think would be a good age or a good kind of way to judge this with your child?
I will say, when I loaded it up on Disney Plus, it set up in the corner 3+, and I went, no, straight away to that 3. What a thinking.
Mm-mm.
I would probably say it is one of those loaded, like you said, loaded question, and it really does come down to the kid.
We're all speaking here. Actually, none of us, well, I know of, are parents. Cat babies and dog babies, fur babies and stuff don't really count. Although my lovely little dachshund does love Bolt. He does love to watch Bolt, and he will watch Bolt quite happily with me. But it's, as I say, we're not the parents here. You will know your child better than anybody else, and do look at, the film's classification, go onto the BBFC's website where it gives you detailed classification of what's going in. But yeah, again, yes, it is just kind of a rough kind of mess. I would say a 3-year-old might find this tough. I know a 3-year-old would find this tough.
Although I do know a 4-year-old who could recite you Jurassic Park. Loves that film.
That's different
Loves
though, Jess.
it.
That's different. That's dinosaurs.
That's a bit freaky. Dude gets eaten in a toilet. Come on. That's a bit traumatizing to a small child.
I just, on a kind of Banterflix typical segue, there's no way this podcast is going to be under an hour. I do remember one of my best friends, he was telling me about his eldest boy is obsessed with dinosaurs. It's just a rite of passage, I think, for boys and girls, but I think particularly for boys, there seems to be a stage. I didn't need Jurassic Park to get obsessed with dinosaurs. And there's a sequence in, I think it's Jurassic World, where it just happened to be on and they were watching it and they decided they were watching it at home with both parents in the room, that it wasn't going to be too scary. And there's a sequence in it where I think it's Vincent D'Onofrio tries to reason with a raptor. It's like, come on, man, we're all in the same. It's like, okay, as adults, we all know you're a bit of a dick, Vincent, because, they're dinosaurs. They don't really understand you. And this child just found it hilarious when the raptor mauled him. And I was just like, you know what?
Yeah.
You know what? He's not my godson, but he's pretty damn close. He's pretty cool in my book. We can be friends. So yeah, you can't judge. That's the whole point. You can't really judge. Every child is different. Parents will know better. I do think 3+.
Or grandparents,
Yes.
because my grandparents were the one that judged and knew that Disney child-appropriate films freaked me out, made me cry. At the age of 7, you can watch Alien no bother. And turns out they were right. I can
Amazing.
watch Alien no bother.
I love that.
No issues. Lion King, still cry.
True. I watched
It just
Nightmare on Elm
depends
Street.
on your child.
I watched Nightmare on Elm Street when I was about 8 or 9 because my father had it recorded, and I was like, "Can I watch this?" And he was like, "Yeah, it's on you. If you have nightmares from watching it, it's not my fault." And you're like,
That's what my mum and dad were like. They were like, watch whatever you want, but if you get scared, that's your responsibility.
"Yeah, I
love them.
I think we just care more for little animated characters. I know I care for little Five-O from An American Tail. Five-O! And if you've never seen it, I don't know. I think we need to get you both back to watch this and just do a series of podcasts about animated mice in movies. And that's what we need to do. That's the next segue we're going to go down. I would definitely recommend it. It looks a little bit cheap by today's standards. There's no denying that. I think Steven Spielberg was involved in An American Tail. I don't think John Williams.
I think he was, because I'm near sure that was one of John Bluth's ones after he left Disney.
Yeah.
And him and Steven Spielberg are quite close, so I wouldn't be surprised.
I think he's a producer. I don't think he's involved in any other way. So it's worth a watch. Maybe that's just me. And this passes the animated mice in movies test for me. It's well worth a watch. And the last thing I will say, it's nice. I really don't think The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh had that on it, but I don't think this film has the dreaded, this film contains outdated stereotypes.
It did. It didn't have that. It did have it, this film depicts smoking. And I was like, you're not going to mention the alcohol? No. I think it's because they were breathing out smoke. That they put it depicts smoking.
Okay.
Although the film did have a nudity controversy at one point.
Yes! Oh my god, I literally only found out about this today.
Yeah, they had
Oh
to
my
recall a load of the videos, I think it was, when it was released, because during, obviously, some of the background stills, when they're just taking off on the Albatross kind of airline, which, again, Animal Crossing came to mind, which I know was well after. But when they're taking off, you can see in the background in some of the buildings, there is 2 consecutive pictures of a topless woman in the background you can make out. And I'm like, whatever sad dad was able to pause it enough to get to that image.
Hey, Jess, why do you think I was frantically trying to find my VHS copy of The Rescuers? Say nothing about that, but pausing on VHS.
Didn't mean to call you out.
Yeah, pausing on VHS just isn't the same. It's not the same. That's all I can say. It's weird. It is weird because you would wonder. I don't think they're that bad in the grand scheme of things, but the little UN sequence at the start, there's some kind of
Stereotypes.
outdated stereotypes. But I think when you look, I think it's compared to that kind of awkward cat from the Aristocats who reappears in Robin. We don't talk about him, who makes a reappearance in Robin Hood. I don't think they're as bad, but you know,
it's
there's
kind of cute. Like it is outdated, but it was kind of cute. And it is the quickest way in a kid's film to be like to try and explain to a kid what the UN is. The quickest way to do that is to pick key associations from certain countries. So a kid will go, "Oh, that's what people in Africa wear. So that mouse must be from Africa." My partner's looking at me like I'm a weirdo.
It's all right. That happens to me all the time. And we also have, let's not forget as well, we have the Rescue Aid Society based on Aesop's tale, which I just love. I mean, again, I love this. And I think, you know, we've talked quite a bit. We've rambled off about a few things. Yes, I have went off in tangents. Five-all! And quite a bit. I'm going to have fun editing this podcast. But just because I did this in the last recording, and it's not a full-on essay, but there is a lovely little section. As I've referred to earlier on in the orphanage where they go to visit to find out some more details about Penny, and we have the lovely Rufus the cat, who he is
the best cat.
I love how she holds him, and he's perfectly happy. He's gonna like walking around. You can't see this because this is I'm doing a video medium on an audio format, but you know, we've got the way that she holds him up, and he's just kind of got his cat, and she's got his pretty much just, I'll use an old outdated term, just under the oysters, and just kind of just going through, and he's perfectly happy, and he's just this old cat who just wants to be around Penny and loves being around these children, and he's just lovely. But
he reminds me of my Henry.
Oh.
My old Henry boy.
Did he talk to you, Jess, in the same way that Rufus talked?
Sadly not. He hated children, but I loved him. He did not love me till I was older. I could leave him alone.
No. So we're gonna dedicate this little bit then to little Henry, the child-hating cat, and this lovely little quote. And there's two parts of it. There's a part from Rufus and there's a part from Penny, and I just love it. And it did bring a little tear to my eye watching this. So here we go. Rufus on Faith. Faith is a bluebird we see from far, and as sure as the first evening star, you can't touch it, or buy it, or wrap it up tight, but there's just the same, making things turn out right. I was going to do a Penny voice. Can't touch it, or buy it, or wrap it up tight, but it's there just the same, making things turn out right. But whoever adopts me has to adopt Teddy too. Oh, they'll love him. He doesn't eat much, does he? I love that. I mean, when I heard Rufus, and that's it. And it's just that sense, you know, we just, yes.
You've broken me.
That's 2 for 2 then. I made Therese cry last time.
So every episode you have to make somebody cry.
Yeah, I'll just find a quote from the film and just say it in my kind of best audible style.
We're doing the Fox and the Hound next, so that won't be hard.
That's okay.
No, that film doesn't exist. No.
And then is Oliver coming up soon as well, or is it in this era?
It's Fox and the Hound, The Black Cauldron, Great Mouse Detective, and then Oliver.
And we know Victoria will cry with Oliver.
Always do.
Yeah. Okay, so look, I don't really know what else there is to say. It's a lovely film. It's well worth a watch. I think if you're a parent listening to this and you have a young adult, a young child, I would say maybe you'll know your child better than anybody else. Maybe try them in a few other Disney films if they're getting into that type of thing. But definitely at some point, sit your child down, or sit down as an adult if you've never seen the bloody film, and just watch The Rescuers, because it's lovely. It's absolutely lovely. So on that, there's not much else to say. Thank you very much, Victoria Brown.
Thank you, Jim.
And thank you very much, Jess Blair.
Thank you very much, Jim.
I don't quite know how this queen off is going to go on from here, but I think our two queens are going to synergize and become two queens, and we'll kind of go Elsa and Anna and rule the kingdom together. That's what we'll go with there. So thank you very much. We'll be back soon with another episode, but for now, until then, goodbye.
This has been We Need to Talk About Movies. Thanks for listening. For more information, visit banterflix.com. See you next time.